everybody, and welcome to our webinar / fireside chat today. I'm Suze Harkness. I'm here from WhisperClaims, and I'll be moderating today's discussion all about AI in R&D tax advisory. Before we dive in, let me briefly introduce you to today's panel. Firstly, we're delighted to have with us today Shilin Chen, co-founder and CEO of SmartClaim. SmartClaim are our new AI partner. SmartClaim is an AI tool purpose-built for R&D tax advisory, and they support a range of firms, augmenting advisor experience and making R&D technical work smarter, more efficient, and more rewarding. And we also have our other panel member is Jen Badger, our MD here at WhisperClaims and co-founder. Since 2018, Jen and the team, we've all been combining technology with expertise. Our software is designed specifically for accountants and advisors preparing R&D tax claims on behalf of their clients. Our software gives users a framework to prepare and deliver compliant claims with confidence, and our unlimited advice line support helps our users to navigate grey areas, scheme questions, and also any eligibility challenges that they may have. So AI is everywhere in our professional and personal lives, and it's almost more unusual to come across software or services that don't use AI than those that do. And the big question for us in R&D tax is, where does AI add value and where does human expertise remain essential? And that's what we're going to be exploring today. Thank you, Jen, for popping up the agenda, just to let you know some of the subjects that we're going to be covering as part of today's discussion. We will have a short sneaky peek inside the WhisperClaims app and the AI functionality that we have and how it works. And also, don't forget, you can see at the bottom of the screen there, we will have a Q&A later on in the session. So please do pop any questions that you have for the panel in the Q&A box, which you'll find somewhere in the middle of the ribbon on your Zoom panel. And first off, Shilin's going to give us a brief expert overview of what AI is and how SmartClaim works in practice before we kick off the discussion. So over to you, Shilin.
Hi, everyone. So first off, what exactly is the AI that we keep talking about? It's being used by so many people, but we very few explore what exactly it is. So in short, it is a mathematical machine. We feed in billions and billions of pages for all the libraries, the internet, etc. And then we have this process of turning pages into numbers. This is where you see all the fancy jargons like vectors, embeddings, but essentially they are just turning words and pages into numbers. And once we have the numbers, then we can use mathematical methods to figure out the connections or patterns within these numbers, essentially transforming meaning on the abstract human understandable meaning into something that's represented in a vector space for the AI to understand. Then once AI kind of eats in billions of pages, we then give the carrot and stick to train AI to be more helpful and be more polite and be more pleasant to work with humans. This is the part that we call reinforcement learning, so human feedback. So at this stage, AI not only understands the words in terms of numbers, but also can be a helpful assistant to then help the humans. And eventually, AI starts to generate output, and it does that by predicting the next words. So for example, if AI says, "I am AI," it's essentially saying that "am" is most likely to be followed by "I," and then "I am AI." AI is meaning-wise most likely to be following "am." So it kind of writes by doing each word at a time, but eventually creating a holistic article that mathematically or number-wise is most likely to come out with this output, with this input. That explains many things that we see, for example, hallucinations, for example, the variance in the output. If you think about it being a mathematical machine, then all of this makes sense. Hallucination-wise, for example, for AI, if you ask it, what does 1 + 1 equals to? And the AI may think, oh, 1 and 2, they are mathematically similar in terms of meanings. So for AI saying 1 + 1 equals to 3, it may not be that mathematically different from saying 1 + 1 equals to 2. And therefore, there's loads of the questions that we'll explore in more detail later on about dealing with AI reliably and dealing with all these behaviors around potential hallucinations, etc. And if you go into the next page, yeah, so how does SmartClaim works? Well, essentially, we are taking a cutting-edge AI models and making it very helpful for R&D consultants. If we take SmartClaim, the first step is you will be putting in an input. This could be, for example, a narrative that you have just written, and you're asking AI to give some feedback. Then we go into the SmartClaim layer, where we have a cutting-edge AI model. We're putting loads of configurations. We built in HMRC guidelines like DSIT, GFC3, where to give you some prompts to be like, be helpful, be comprehensive, give feedback, and all of that. And eventually, AI takes the input, takes in our instructions, and give you the output, which is the desired outcome for this AI model. Great. Handing back to Suze.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Just before we kick off the section, just checking, Jen, can you see that? Does that come up?
Yeah.
Yes, brilliant. Okay, yeah. So according to a recent survey that I came across when doing some research for this chat, and I'll pop the source in the comments in a moment, it turns out that around 70% of UK businesses who responded to this survey are already using or actively considering using AI, which is really huge. But that still leaves 30% who feel hesitant or seem hesitant. So we'd love to just get a bit of a feel for where you all feel on this spectrum, specifically thinking about R&D tax. How familiar are you with using AI in your R&D tax processes? Are you already using it? Are you considering using it soon? Are you curious but cautious? Are you not planning to use it at all? Just give you another 5 seconds or so just to let everybody have a little think and answer. It's very interesting seeing those stats coming through already. We've got some tie breaks going on here. Okay, so we have a bit of a mix. We have a bit of a mix there, which is interesting. So it's good to see that lots of people are already using it, but equally the same sort of proportion of the audience are cautious and curious at the same time. So that's a great platform for us to springboard from. So let's start from the top with our first question. I'll just end that poll now. To the panel, to Jen and Shilin, where can AI add the most value in R&D tax relief today, do you think? What's your opinion?
I'll jump in first, shall I? First of all, that poll result is pretty much exactly what I would expect the kind of audience that we get for these webinars to say, where we have people who are enthusiastically using it and people who are very cautious, and they seem to be, as far as we can tell, whenever we speak to anyone, about equal in terms of numbers. So that's really good that the audience we have is the audience we would normally see. In terms of what AI can be used for an R&D tax relief, obviously, as everyone knows, there's a lot of generic tools out there, and you can use AI for pretty much anything you do in R&D tax relief. And I think we can talk more about the risks of that. But everything from recording your meetings, transcribing your meetings, checking eligibility of the projects that you've got, reviewing your narratives, actually writing the narratives, everything that can be done by AI. I think one of the key points to make at this stage, though, is around if you use generic AI for those things, it's actually quite risky. And I think, would you agree with that, Shilin?
Yeah. Different kind of risk that we can explore more in a bit.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm just taking some examples from this week in terms of the use of AI. We had a client come to us who had a question about how to properly claim the tax benefit from a merged RDEC claim. And she had asked her tax filing software, she had asked me, she'd asked other experts, I passed it on to other experts, and she'd asked AI. And the answer she got consistently out of the generic AI was wrong. And that's very, very worrying in that, because it's not a specialist thing. It's picking up the information that is out there that isn't necessarily provided by experts, if that makes sense. So it can take the legislation, but it doesn't necessarily understand everything to do with tax computations and R&D tax legislation, for example. The other example I wanted to give was, in preparing for this webinar, I had to produce for our demo a project description, a project narrative to run through the AI. And I thought, well, I might as well use AI to produce that. And it's actually quite scary, because literally the prompt I used was, write me a project narrative covering these 4 areas in this area of science. And it's produced something very, very convincing from nothing. So that's my kind of immediate warning. And we're always being, I think Susie would agree that we as a company are quite cautiously optimistic about the use of AI, but quite cautious. But it can be used for all aspects if you want to, but there are things you need to do to be careful about that.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Shilin?
Yeah, my mind towards AI is always like, imagine this is a super powerful dragon that can, I don't know, lift loads of cargoes that I want to lift. But you always want to keep the dragon in kind of like a nice cage, so it wouldn't run around doing stuff that is not intended. So at SmartClaim, for example, we're building loads of guardrails or checks to make sure AI is doing exactly what we're asking it to do and not doing stuff like making hallucinations or fraudulent information. So for example, in the hallucination stuff that I was mentioning earlier, we can indeed put in a hallucination check to say, making sure all the output you are giving is directly coming from the input and you are not making stuff up that seems correct, but it's actually not coming from anywhere. And once we have a AI that are properly caged with the right guardrails, the right setup, then it can be indeed very helpful for the humans that are using them. So it's a bit like if you just hired a freshly graduated PhD in a field, and then you have put this PhD through your in-house training of R&D tax relief, historical claims, good practices. Then this PhD will have all the knowledge that is needed that we have built in to do a good job on your R&D tax. But you still want to, of course, be working with the PhD and not letting them just run through freely as a junior in the team. You always want to have a human in the loop. But once you have the human in the loop, that PhD junior can be very helpful in terms of giving you back time, be a nice sounding board, and be helpful in a wide range of R&D tax. So whenever you're not sure, think about, would you let a junior do this? That is usually the answer for, would you let AI do this?
It's actually a really helpful way to think of it. I'm going to take that one away and use it again.
Very, very good analogy. Okay, so that's great. So AI can assist really greatly with things like efficiency and certain tasks. And that naturally, I suppose, raises questions or moves us on to the next section about where human expertise will win out over the AI. So where does human expertise win out over AI? What can't AI manage without human oversight? And things like client trust and relationship building and things like that as well come into that.
I'll let you go first on this one, Shilin, because you can give the more technical answer.
Yeah. Well, there are many things that AI has. Well, there are many things that humans do well that AI is not doing well at the moment. So, for example, asking AI to do mathematical questions, that's usually an area where AI can fall short. There's a classical one. If you ask AI how many character R is in the word strawberry, and if you ask GPT-4o and a bunch of other models there, the likelihood of AI getting it wrong is just surprisingly not low. And there are other stuff like if you ask AI specific legislation questions on tax laws, HMRC practices, etc. The way that AI is built up is it has been trained on what is available there on the internet, but it's not always up to date. And even if you ask AI to search for particular websites, it may not know where to find or what's the right way to read on the legislations. And even if you take HMRC, for example, on R&D tax, there's more than one instance of HMRC being either ambiguous or even erroneous in some instances. And in these cases, we cannot trust AI to be the interpreter of legislations. There must be a human tax expert in the loop to validate all the output. And other scenarios, for example, if we let AI give us content on, say, R&D tax narratives, then it's always good to have human in the loop to be the one verifying and tracking the output. One reason is that there is, of course, hallucinations. Even if the chance are very low, like 0.001 likelihood, it may get one small detail wrong, but in the context of tax, that cannot be tolerated. So there must be a user in the loop. And the other one is, if we are working with R&D companies, advising them on R&D matters, that's technically classified as tax advice in many scenarios. And if we let AI be the tax advisor, AI itself is only a mathematical machine. It's not legally responsible. It cannot be held accountable for its actions. Therefore, the advisor must be the human maybe with AI providing a sounding board in the background.
And I think I agree with everything you've said there, Shilin. I think the other side of it in terms of human versus AI element of this is around what Suze was saying around client relationships and things like that. Much as I know it's completely possible to transcribe what someone has said and then ask follow-up questions. What a human can do that an AI can't is read people. You can see, I know I've done so many technical meetings in my time, and it's so easy to tell when someone doesn't understand what you're trying to explain to them about what uncertainty is. A human can immediately pick that up and rephrase, ask different questions, come at it from a different angle, that kind of thing. And I think that as well, and we'll get onto this later, but AI only knows what it knows. It doesn't know what it doesn't know. And I think, again, when you're sitting with someone, you know whether you've got the full story or not. You know actually there maybe have missed the point, that there's more to tell, even whether you're talking to the right person. I know I've sat with many FDs, and all respect to FDs, but they don't necessarily understand the detail of what the software developers have done. And the information that they give could be taken by AI to write a claim that isn't quite right. I'm not saying false, because that's not fair, but it doesn't necessarily go into the right level of detail, or they've got the wrong end of the stick on something, or fundamentally just don't have the details. So I think that side of it is incredibly important as well, is having that relationship with the client, being able to tell if you've got the right person with the right level of understanding in the room, and extracting that information from people, I think is very, very difficult to do without a person.
That's a really good point. I've been thinking about like how the industry is going in the future, and what does competitiveness look like in the future. And it feels like in the next like 2 to 3 years, what differentiate different players or the firms is how effectively they can be applying this novel power, this AI technology. There are different ways that people apply it, but how can they do it in a way that is safe, is robust, and is also leveraging, getting all the benefits out of it. But if you look in the longer term, say after 2 to 5 years, that everyone is empowered by AI to some extent, then what differentiates good advisors versus bad advisors? Of course, there's ethical standards, there's all the practice. But like Jen said, a very important element is the human touch. Can you look clients in the eyes, hold their hands through a difficult tax claim, and then basically be building the trust and the support along the ways? There's the relationship, there's the human touch, that's the lasting element in the long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also, it goes along with, I think what you said touches on accountancy in a bigger sense, and the advisory market in a much bigger sense, which is there is a huge amount of automation coming. It's been happening for a long time. And it is something that, rather than seeing it as a replacement for humans, it has to be seen as a way to free up human time to do human tasks. Like, as you say, look people in the eye, shake them by the hand, have that conversation, gauge their understanding, all that kind of thing that can't be done by computers. So rather than ever seeing this as a replacement for humans, it has to be a way to make us more efficient, more effective, and that kind of thing.
So really, really good points. Yeah, AI should be forcing us to think harder and not stop us thinking, I think, is like stuff that people are scared about. And it's not just about the words on the page, it's having somebody, your advisor, there to stand behind you as a claimant, should HMRC have any questions to ask as well, because the AI won't be there to help if you experience an inquiry situation, right? That'll be down to you and the person who's giving you that advice. So yeah, that's great points made there.
I would say some people over the last few years have had to deal with the high rate of inquiries from HMRC would have loved to be able to send the AI as the tax advisor.
Yes.
And just be like, just talk to my chat box, and that will give you all the answers you need.
Yeah. Great. Well, that kind of leads us into the next section. You both touched on it ever so slightly, but I don't know if it would be worth expanding a little bit on about the whole compliance and legislation side of things, and whether you did sort of kind of allude to this already, Shilin, but whether AI can interpret R&D tax legislation accurately. How can advisors make sure that compliance and risk assessments remain firmly with them and not relying too heavily on the LLMs?
Yeah, got a couple of those already. So legislation, always double check the results. When you're having AI do the work, always have human in the loop. And eventually all the work should be validated and kind of tracked by the human advisor before they go on to the clients, because eventually we are the one providing the tax advice.
And I think that's absolutely true. I think the other side of this to think about is the way the way that we as humans interact with legislation generally and in R&D tax relief, because it's basically impossible to write legislation that has no room for interpretation.
Yes.
So there's always, and in R&D tax relief specifically, obviously we have the legislation and then we have HMRC's guidance, and those two things don't always line up. As we said, there were some mistakes made with the way the guidance was written on the basis of the legislation, or pieces, bits that were amended. So there's always a level of interpretation of legislation or taking legislation and actually applying it to real life, which for me, that's almost the most concerning part about AI in R&D, is the fact that the legislation doesn't necessarily line up with the way people do work in real life. And there has to be an element of sort of critical thinking, I suppose, from the people that are doing it to see how you could apply legislation to this sector, this project, whatever it is. Obviously, I'm not in any way saying that people shouldn't be applying the legislation as written, but it has to be interpreted and applied. And that changes, that interpretation can change. HMRC's interpretation of the legislation might differ to yours. And that's where my concern about the AI comes in, is where is it learning that from? We can learn it from the basic legislation, which is exactly where I would want it to go from, but it doesn't then have that nuanced interpretation and discussion and sort of decision, that's sort of collective decision that's come to, if this is how we as a sector, our best practice for applying legislation is this. But you also couldn't go directly from people's blogs about the legislation and how they apply it, because they're not necessarily correct. So there's got to be, and that balance is something that comes from experience in people. And that's where, again, I would hate to see people allowing the AI to overrule their own experience, their own knowledge, their own kind of, I've done 100 software claims, but the AI says that this one isn't eligible and I think it is. Digging into why the AI is saying that is absolutely what we should be doing, but allowing it to kind of, as Sue's mentioned before, taking away the need for thinking is absolutely not what we should be aiming for as a society generally, never mind as a sector.
Exactly. On the legislation point, well, first, I'm thinking if we do know the actual source of the legislation and we are in a position to validate accuracy, then for some limited questions, AI could be helpful. So for example, I've always wrapped my head around the CNF notification rules about when is the notification windows, how are you supposed to notify, and then I've been copy and pasting that section to AI and be like, give me some dates to illustrate this with examples. And that has been helping me with understanding what, like how the original line was originally phrased is not very accessible. So having AI give me examples in those cases has been helpful indeed. But it's only when I know this is exactly the right place to look and I know exactly what the correct reading should be. On the compliance side, there are many things that are still true pre-AI and post-AI. So for example, the R&D claim we put in must be accurate and truthful based on real R&D projects. AI has indeed made fraud easier. So for example, previously, if you want to make up a non-existent claim, you have to wrap your head around all these R&D details. But now anyone can use, say, ChatGPT and be like, make up this for me. And the output will look like surprisingly seems to be very true. So in this case, you actually make the work harder for HMRC to really say, this is work by trustworthy R&D advisors on responsible AI use. And there may be some seemingly trustworthy claims, but it's actually made up by AI. And also curious to see how the industry evolves and HMRC evolves to kind of collectively combat people using AI to do fraud.
And I think that obviously, as anyone that's spent any time in the sector knows, it's been an issue from the very beginning of the introduction of the scheme of levels of error and fraud, partially because it's a very complex piece of tax legislation, and also because people always commit fraud if they think they can and they think they can get away with it. And I think, the only thing that's changed in our current situation with AI is that, as you say, it's just easier. It's easier to produce a claim that's fraudulent. And we're all waiting to see what HMRC does, how it reacts, whether we get into an arms race of more and more sophisticated AI being detected by more and more sophisticated AI on their side, or whether we can come to some kind of pragmatic agreement that it's okay to submit claims that used AI as long as these safeguards are in place, or whatever it is. So it's going to be an interesting few years from that point of view.
ultimately all links back to accountability, doesn't it? As we were saying before, if there is an inquiry, it won't be the AI defending the claim, it will be the advisor and the claimant. So relying on AI alone is potentially exposing serious risks. But that's, again, very good points. So that brings us neatly to another key ingredient of compliance, accuracy, and that depends on the data that we feed into the LLMs. So a question for the panel: what kind of data does the AI need to be effective? Considering things like what happens if the data is incomplete or incorrect, how can advisors balance AI inputs with their own judgment? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll start. So it differs by use cases. For example, if we look at using AI to review on the narrative, the input would then be the narrative you have asking AI to be reviewed, and the output would then be AI's feedback on the narrative that you have filled. And in those cases, we want AI to be the one who are flagging risk, giving feedback, not the one who are filling in the gaps, if there are any gaps to start with. So essentially, if you have a poor quality narrative in, you will get a feedback with loads of red flags. And if you have a high quality narrative in, you will get a feedback with loads of green flags. However, for other cases, if we are not asking AI to give, say, feedback, but we're asking AI to do more cognitive, generative stuff. For example, asking AI to say what potentially could fill this gap. Then in those cases, we introduce risk of hallucinations. We introduce potentially what is not aligned with how the client did in the first place. So we always ask AI to only flag the risk, give some questions, but not filling the gaps in. The other characteristic with AI is that essentially, if you have rubbish in, you will expect rubbish out. But if you have rubbish in and got good gold out of it, then something is not quite right.
And I think that's exactly our experience of it. And I think one thing that I remember us talking about quite early on, Shilin, was when I first was testing the system in terms of whether it would work for our clients. Is again that piece about AI only knows what it knows and it only knows what you tell it. So I know we ran a test thing through, which is a software claim, and it came back with fairly good feedback. And this was a project that I had given quite negative feedback about, but that was because the company that were submitting it had absolutely no software knowledge in-house. So they weren't meeting, it was kind of upstream, I suppose. They weren't meeting some of the requirements of having a competent professional involved in the project. So the way that the project had been expressed itself was fine. And it actually, the AI knows that and it can go from that information. And again, so it's again that need for thinking. And I know obviously you've made some edits to your software and your service to make sure that you're looking for competent professionals as part of the thing, because that's a really important part of the kind of context of a project. And I think that's it. And again, this is where, as we touched in the beginning, using generic tools is very, very dangerous because they haven't been given those safeguards. Suze always says it, that AI just wants to be helpful. It's been trained to be helpful. And therefore, if there's a gap, unless it's told not to, the AI will fill in the gaps for you. It will make it sound good. It will pull in information from wherever it can find it about the topic to give you everything you've asked for. And sometimes that's okay if you're writing a piece of marketing content and you just want it to go out to the internet and pull in information about this particular thing. Great, you'd be doing that as a person. So doing that as an AI is fine, but you wouldn't as a, again, you wouldn't want your graduate PhD student going out and just Googling what, I'm trying to think of a good example. I know that way back in the day it was SEO. You just be like, oh, what have they probably done with SEO? What changes has Google made in the last few months, right? We'll just assume that. And that's again, no assumption should be made. And that's where we're trying to make sure that, the data is accurate, the data is correct, and the AI isn't making up for any deficiencies in that data.
Exactly. If something's not in the input in the first place, AI of course wouldn't know that it's there. So for example, in terms of reading people, if you come across the client who just seems super, I don't know, if they seem to be a care home and doing this and that doesn't seem to be genuine R&D claims. Even if they are describing a fantastic product that sounds qualifying, there will still be the human element involved of validating the competency of the professionals involved, judging the clients to see if they are seem to be qualifying clients, etc. Those info wouldn't be captured by AI. So the role of human in all of this is still as a safeguard and super critical. And of course, in terms of handling client data, it must be secure, it must be safeguarded. And then for clients who are essentially for those clients, especially for those who are, say, in industries like defense or high technology, or those who are going through a patent application, you don't want their data to go into the public sphere. Otherwise, that would just be a catastrophe for everyone. So we have to be, when we feed data into AI, also treat those with the highest security and make sure they're not leaving the private sphere. For example, if you're using GPT, I think for GPT and Anthropic, the default is for them to use your data for AI training. And there's a likelihood for those training materials to then be used by AI models in the future on public sense. And that could be a big risk for everyone involved.
So everything you said just made me think of a client that I once worked with who like we walked into the office, and I'm trying to make sure I don't give anything away. The company went bust quite soon after we spoke to them. But you were just like, this is dodgy as heck. There is no way that this is eligible R&D. And you kind of go through the conversation, and we talked about the project, and they seemed, you know, borderline, but okay. And we went back, and I just remember trying to do the costs with this guy and him insisting on, for example, that he'd spent £4,000 on electricity. And it was like, it says £400 in your accounts. So one of those two things you said is wrong. And again, this is something where a human can immediately go, no, I don't, the way you're talking to me, everything about the way you're acting makes me think that you're lying. Whereas an AI just goes, well, you've said this, but there's this, which one do you want me to use? It's not going to bring in that kind of, yeah, that critical side, that kind of, no, this doesn't feel right. I mean, I'm going to hope the AI can't feel that something is right or wrong, because I don't want AI feeling. But no matter what, as you say, you're totally right to say that there is a thing around with anything to do with accuracy of data. I think people are better at detecting it in that bigger sense, rather than AI that can take the data and say, compared to the legislation, compared to the guidelines, this is great. I can produce something good from it or not. But it can't go, yeah, but I spoke to you and you seem really dodgy, so I don't really want to do this claim anymore. And that's the thing, as a human, I also have the ability to go, no, I just don't, I'm not comfortable doing your claim. I don't believe you should be claiming. Again, an AI tool isn't going to say, actually, no, I don't, you seem dodgy, I'm not doing your claim.
Yeah, if you put a W-United claim, infamously ineligible, into GPT and be like, prove why this is eligible, it will give you fantastic reasons for why this is eligible, which are totally made up, just because GPT wants to please you, all of that. We try many different, well, there are many things that we do to avoid that happening with SmartClaim, but with GPT, that could be a risk.
I read somewhere yesterday that somebody was describing AI models like as sycophantic and overly flattering, because they're always trying to please you. That's their goal, and their aim is to continuously please you. So no matter whatever you give them, they're always going to want to put some kind of positive spin on it. So obviously that's, as you said, Shilin, in making something that's absolutely ineligible sound beautifully eligible is a big issue. I wondered, you both mentioned financial information, and Shilin, you talked about numbers a bit earlier on. Are there any points that either of you would like to kind of bring up about the number side, and how, you know, like for example, how maybe the large language models aren't there quite yet in terms of identifying financial information? So like for example, if a client's, say, financial hygiene is not already quite well structured, it's quite difficult for them to, I've heard it's quite difficult for numbers to be accurately pulled out. Is that the case, or have you got other opinions?
There's a typical hope or use case that we will want AI to clean up massive financial data. For example, if I have a payroll and I have the people's timesheets, can AI be the one who merge them together? And in those scenarios, there will be usually occurrence of someone, for example, Jonathan, being called Jonathan in payroll and being called Johnny in a timesheet. For a human, it's easy to say, oh, they must be the same person if I can merge them together. But giving AI that power could be a slippery slope. If today AI can be like, Jonathan is Johnny, tomorrow it could be like, Liz is Elizabeth, and they just have a never-ending cascade of assumptions and inference going forward. So yeah, I would say Excel for now is a good firm for financials. AI potentially could help be like, maybe this could be potential merging or conflicts that you want to check, but shouldn't be the one in the driver's seat.
That's exactly the point I was going to make, is that in some ways, I think people need to be careful that AI is the right tool to use, because it is a tool. And as you say, like Excel right now would do all of that financial stuff far more accurately and far more safely than any of the kind of AI tools that are out there, just because that's exactly what it was designed for. It has all those algorithms in the background that can merge things, highlight where, from this list to this list, there's these differences, and you as a human can fix them. And in some ways, it's not right now particularly necessary, I guess, to have an AI tool that can do that when we have really good tools that everybody has. Everyone's sitting there with some kind of spreadsheeting tool on their computer. And sometimes I feel like sometimes there's that rush, I suppose, with new technology to adopt it for the sake of adopting it rather than looking at it critically and going, it's really, really good at this part and I should use it for that. But this part, I already have really good tools. And there's no need to kind of rush to bring it into there.
Exactly.
Very good points. Yeah, the advisor's critical eye still matters greatly in those scenarios, right? Okay, so even if we have accurate data, there's still another question around how we keep that data safe. And Shilin, you've already touched on that a little bit, but just before we dive into our next section, which is on security, I'd love to, if I just hopefully launch that new poll there. It would be great if we can just get a bit of feedback from the audience. Hopefully you're all still with us about what your feelings are overall about using AI with your clients and your clients' financial data. Are you concerned? Is security and privacy like a top priority? Are you just concerned, but as long as there are clear safeguards in place, you're happy to use it? Are you not concerned at all, or do you not have any opinion on that? Gosh, we're getting very clear points already there. Most at the minute are polling. I'll just give you a few more seconds to answer, everyone. Most, or we're neck and neck between very concerned and somewhat concerned. Let's give you 5 more seconds for everyone to answer. Yeah, I think you're all done. I'll just share those results for you all. So yeah, so understandably, security and privacy are forefront of most of the audience's mind here today. So yeah, let's build on that. I think the next slide, Shilin, you've just got a bit of an explain about security overall before we go into the next question.
Yes, this is a slide that I explain to anyone every day on an everyday basis. It's the most frequent question on AI use. But with not just AI, with any tools that you're using that concerns client data, your own data, you always want to figure out how that's being handled, how that's being stored, and what's the storage or deletion policies afterwards. The absolute baseline for any data use is that it should be cyber secure and it should be GDPR compliant. For example, if that's built upon enterprise-grade security infrastructure, then that takes cybersecurity on point. If it's clear on how GDPR data are being handled, then it takes the GDPR compliance. And there are additional stuff that we can do on top. For example, on the SmartClaim, our approach is to minimize storage or don't store anything. So after AI sends the response back, once you receive the data, then we start to purge everything that has been retained on the SmartClaim side. So there's no chance of what is in storage being leaked, or there's also no chance of anyone taking data and train an AI model on top of it. Well, we wouldn't want to do that anyway, but there's no chance that we can do it just by not saving data in the first place. And with any AI tools, for example, if you use GPT and you can use Anthropic, there will always be a security kind of policies and switch. The default is for them to take the data, store it, train the AI model with it. So if you're using open AI models out there, you always want to double check that and switch it off if that's applicable.
Super. Thanks for that, Shilin. I mean, we have covered a few of these, but just in case there's any discussion points that anybody feels like they might want to talk about. So I guess the questions that I had was around how concerned should advisors be about security when using AI tools, and what safeguards are essential. You've kind of covered that, but also then what types of data should potentially never be entered into an LLM, or not right now anyway. Does anyone have any opinions about that? Maybe Shilin, if you want to kick us off.
Good question. For data that shouldn't be there in the first place, well, AI has loads of filters to filter out, say, violence, inappropriate language, and even if you put stuff in there, it just wouldn't process that on those given the guardrails. But for other data like email addresses, names, client company names, as long as that's on good infrastructure and being stored properly, encrypted, or purged afterwards, that's generally safe. However, if you have like super sensitive, say client R&D parameters, and they are not in a position to share the client data, even with advisors, that's just their cool R&D secret. That's best to also keep that on the client side and not let them go into the user side.
Yeah.
And I think from my point of view, it's any business owner should be concerned about cybersecurity, regardless of whether they're using AI or not. And I think AI has its particular threats, its particular security vulnerabilities, but overall, it should be part of your whole thinking about your cybersecurity and how you protect your client data. And don't put anything into the AI that you wouldn't put anywhere else, if that makes sense. As Shilin said, I've worked with clients before that can't share their data off-site. So you have to take your notes by hand and then you work from that. And so nothing, just be as careful with AI as you are with anything else. Again, it's that feeling of don't rush into this, look into the security the provider's using, look into how they do this, make sure they're doing it. And I would say in a business context, it is a really bad idea to use any free open source AI tools out there with client data. Obviously, again, if you wanted to write you an email, fine, but I would say just as a rule of thumb, putting any client data into something free and public is a bad idea. And that AI or not, again, it's not a specific thing about that. It's just think about it in the same way as you would with anything else you use your client data for.
Exactly. It's an attitude of being cautious, taking security seriously, and make sure it's being tracked before launching onto a tool. Or if you're sure that it's a good tool to use, then you don't have to be concerned afterwards. But at the beginning, always going to approach it cautiously.
And again, I think I've been through this because we develop software, so we have to look at all of the third-party tools we use. Again, we've been doing this for the last 8 years of making sure that the security level there is what we would need it to be as providers, and we're happy to provide that to our clients whenever they need us, details of that. And I think that's maybe gives me a slightly different, slightly more in-depth knowledge, I suppose, of cybersecurity than someone that's running an accountancy firm. But I think it's still something everyone in this day and age needs to be concerned about.
100%, yeah. Personal and professional life, I would say, definitely. Okay, so we've covered value, we've covered compliance, we've covered data and security. So it's now time to give you a really quick, brief demo of WhisperClaims. This is just going to be a couple of minutes. Jen's going to open up the WhisperClaims app and show you how the SmartClaim AI functionality works within the app. So you don't need to leave the app. Everything's integrated within WhisperClaims. So Jen, I will just let you switch your screens over. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. And we'll take a look. In the meantime, as well, Jen's bringing the screen up. If any of you have any questions, we will be jumping into the Q&A straight after this. So please do feel free, don't be shy. If you've got any questions at all, do feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. Jen, I'll leave you to get going.
Oh. And I am very aware of the time, so I will make this super quick. Yep, this is the WhisperClaims app. So here you can see recent claims I've been working on. So I'm just going to jump into one of those. Just as a very quick bit of understanding, the WhisperClaims app is based around a structured set of questions. So you can see down here all the things people would be asked about. They've entered data, and the app so far thinks that the claim has met at least the most basic requirements for an eligible claim. We get to the end, and this claim has 2 projects. Both obviously we need to be described under the rules of the AIF. So then we can go to the project description section. I'm going to get rid of that for now. And the client has entered this information. So this information in this project is the stuff I said was produced by AI. So it looks really good. It looks very convincing and is absolute nonsense. So the way that this particular AI tool would work, I would click this button. It will go to Shilin's technology and give back some output. So this is the kind of thing you can get using AI tools within WhisperClaims. And this is a review of what the our clients have actually entered about their projects. So we have an eligibility assessment, so you can see it nice and green here, which is good. And it's taking the inputs we have and comparing them against certain criteria. So this saying that overall eligibility, it looks fine. It's saying you've got advances, you've got uncertainties, it appears to be doing what it needs to be doing according to the guidance. It's saying that compared to the industry baseline, it's done a bit of a review and it thinks some of that might already have been available. So you maybe need to go into a bit more detail about why this thing was particularly eligible, why it was particularly different to what's currently out there. So it just goes through all the kind of thing. It checks that there is uncertainty. It checks that you've got the right kind of activities within the project. And then we also have in this around looking at the actual language within each section. So here it's saying that much as the grammar in the baseline section is correct, it's actually not covering everything you might need to cover. So that reflects above where it said it wasn't covering things to do with the industry baseline. This is saying, okay, you've got a gap here. It doesn't make any suggestions about to fill those gaps, as Shilin was saying. So it's not leading you down the path, it's just pointing out any issues with your narrative. I'm going to bring up the other projects we have in this one because it's got far more red. And so here you can see this one. This one I actually took as one of the examples out of HMRC's guidance. So it was interesting that this came up very badly. But in the overall way, you've got some rationale as to why it seems eligible, but here's some suggested improvements you could make. So you need to clarify the uncertainty, you need to give more detail about the qualifying activities, talk more about the advance, that kind of thing. And all of this is produced in about 60 seconds. So I would say it gives as good a quality review as an experienced advisor who understands the guidance, but takes far less time and just allows you to, you can accept the risks of the claim, or you can go away and try and improve it, get more information from your client, whatever it is you want to do. And what I would hope it would do is if this comes up, if someone gets that nothing about this seems eligible, they will go away and either decide not to submit the claim because that project probably isn't eligible, or learn from that and understand what kind of information they need to get from their client in the first. So I'm going to stop there because that's we're already at 42:1.
Thanks, Jen. You're very quiet. If anyone does have any questions, please start typing now, put them in the Q&A box. But just to, I guess, wrap up, just while waiting to see if anyone does have any questions. Today we've explored, both the opportunities and some of the limits of AI and R&D tax at the moment. This technology is evolving and improving, so quickly, exponentially in front of us all at the moment, in all walks of life. I think the wins so far are that it can absolutely help us to work smarter and more efficiently. But R&D tax, as we all know, is a field where compliance, control, context and nuance matter deeply, and AI can't replace at the minute anyway. I keep caveating that. The advisor's role in building client trust and interpreting the legislation, and also defending a claim, as Jen said and as Shilin has said, it's a tool to empower accountants and advisors. And from our perspective at WhisperClaims here, it's to empower our accountants and advisors who use us. So our goal with partnering with SmartClaim is to give our customers something practical, something flexible and safe that still leaves final decisions firmly in your hands, your human hands. Okay, I think you're all very quiet. That's okay. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Shilin. Thank you, Jen, for your time. It's much appreciated. If anybody would like to learn more about WhisperClaims, please do get in touch, and we'll make sure that you have the support and structure that you need to deliver strong, compliant claims confidently. We will be sending out a recording of today's session if anybody wants to watch back, or if anybody wants to get in contact with us. And it's been lovely to have you all join us today. Oh, I have some questions very quickly. Are you guys okay just for 2 minutes just to answer a couple of questions that have come in? Okay, first question, probably a difficult question. It's always good to start with that. Do we know how much AI is being used on HMRC side?
You can start. Fantastic question.
It is a good question.
Yeah. From what I heard in the industry as a whole, there are at least several instances where HMRC inquiry response are very likely to be AI generated to some extent. This could be a HMRC individual caseworkers AI use, or this could be an organizational level for HMRC itself. But interestingly enough, there's a recent tribunal that pushed HMRC to publicize to what extent they are using AI on the R&D side. And I think HMRC is due to give their results by, I think, September the 16th or 18th. So next week. We're all looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Either HMRC will share what they're doing, or they'll just keep declining, which will be against the tribunal results. So that'll be interesting regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about the exact same thing. So Yeah, I think anyone that has gone through an inquiry with HMRC over the last year is very sure they're using AI, but to what extent? Because HMRC don't want to be open about that. There's no way to know. But the outcome of this tribunal and the freedom of information request should be very interesting. So we're all looking forward to that.
Indeed. Aaron, thank you for your question. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure of the second part, but I'm sure Shilin can answer the first part. So does the paid version of ChatGPT keep all of the info in UK jurisdictions?
Great question. Depends on your GPT settings and TNC. OpenAI essentially is a US company, and if they're using your GPT data to train their own models, then it's very likely that their training wouldn't happen in the UK. However, if you do tweak your settings and go for like a pro plan or whatever, which may ensure that they are not using your AI data to train itself, the likelihood of GPT keeping data in the GPT keeping your data will be more likely than if you don't set the settings. But I'm not sure where the data center or server is located. It may not be a UK located server, and therefore may also be leaving the UK in that sense. So the answer is probably I'm not sure.
I don't know enough about that to answer the question anyway, so thank you.
Just in case there's anybody else with any questions, I don't know, Shilin, this might be a really difficult question also, but is there a somewhere where it's useful to point people to where that's the sort of information that they would be able to find out about? Do they just need to go straight to ChatGPT, OpenAI?
With any software, there will be a terms and conditions somewhere, but some companies made it extremely hard to find and make that extremely hard to read. So yeah, we have to be cautious. We have to do the right things. But they're always putting barriers which are annoying.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much again. Thank you again to the panel. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today. It's been great to have you. If anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to get in touch. And we hope to see you on our next event sometime soon. Look out for that in your inboxes. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.